President of Wellington Hepburn International, and I want to welcome you to our transition series. Today, we have a very interesting topic and a very good lineup of speakers to speak to you about enterprise risk management. Now, even though we've called it ERM, we are still going to speak a little bit about how you can apply this to your personal life. All right. Now, before I introduce myself formally and hand it over to the other speakers, we can play our entrance video for the series, and then we shall get started. Our world has changed, and that has impacted the way that we live and the way that we work. And as we look over the changes that we've gone through over the past year, we have to stop and say, do the skills that we have now still allow us to be effective in this new normal? Can we perform at our best? And the answer is no. We need to have new skills, new competencies in order to be effective in this new normal. And through this workshop series, we will cover 10 competencies that will allow us to achieve excellence and to maintain high performance. If the world has shifted and adapted, we too need to shift, adapt, and transition. Welcome to the Transition Series. Our world. Excellent. So, like I said before, my name is Wellington Hepburn, President for Wellington Hepburn International. And today we'll be speaking to you about enterprise risk management. We have three of the best, in my opinion, risk management professionals in the country. Hubert Edwards, Derek Smith, and Natasha Roel Bastian. And very shortly, they'll introduce themselves. And today I will be your host, and shortly the co-host Ahmad Thompson will also introduce himself. I'd like to welcome all of you that are participating today from the Bahamas, whether that's in Nassau or whether you're tuning in from a family island, and also any international participants. When we did our previous series called the Corona Collaboration Culture Series, we had participants from all over the world. I kid you not. I mean, Africa, the UK, Canada, Spain, all different countries. So I know that some of you here are international participants, and we appreciate your time. A few guidelines I want you to be aware of. Today's session is going to be recorded.
Yes.
It is. So it is recording right now. And the reason why it's being recorded is for participants that cannot attend live, we like to post it on the WHI YouTube page so that they can also avail themselves of the content. As we go through today's session, we're going to have presentations from each one of our panelists. And as they present, please make certain to jot your questions down because we do have a Q&A segment immediately after the last presenter, okay? I do also want to mention to you that in terms of allowing all of us to participate, uh, well, I do ask that you please mute your mics. I used to have an old boss that used to say please and thank you. That's a please and thank you moment. So mute your mics. And when we do get to that Q&A segment, if you have any questions, you can feel free to raise your hands and we'll allow you to unmute yourself to get your question answered. Or you can post it in the chat, or if you wish, you can send it directly to Ahmad or myself, and we'll make sure that we get it answered for you. All right. So Ahmad, over to you to continue with our introductions.
Indeed. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you join us for our third and potentially most riveting sessions to date.
I tell you.
As Wellington mentioned, we have three, I know, right? We have three very, very adept experts today in the persons of Natasha Roel Bastian, Derek Smith, and Hubert Edwards. And we are excited today to engage you and for you to engage us on the topic of ERM. And so my name is Ahmad Thompson, and I have the pleasure of co-hosting this series with Wellington, and it is indeed a pleasure. It's been a great journey so far, and we're excited for what's to come today and onwards. And so I have the distinct pleasure of introducing to you, or rather allowing these individuals to introduce themselves to you. And we're going to start with ladies first. So Natasha, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this lockdown Sunday. So I am Natasha Bastian, or Roel Bastian, whichever you prefer. And I am a practitioner of 20 plus years. I started out actually in AML compliance, and I evolved, like we'll hear ERM is an evolution. I evolved, and now I'm focused on enterprise risk management principally. So I'm an attorney by profession. I've also done my AML training, MBA, trust practitioner, and here we are now focusing on enterprise risk management. So I hope you have a good time today and you learn lots more about enterprise risk management.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that, Natasha. Derek, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, Wellington, for the invitation to share in this most important topic today. My name is Derek Smith Jr. I am a certified anti-money laundering specialist, a professional services Bahamas top 40 under 40 recipient, an AML compliance professional, local business columnist, don't forget a Rotarian, and a father and a husband, and I have 4 children, and that's me in a nutshell.
You know, I was going to tease Derek and say, I hope he doesn't say that I am a father and a husband of 4. So I'm like, that wouldn't really sound.
Truth.
Indeed. And last but not least, Mr. Hubert Edwards, the floor is yours, sir.
I know Hubert was connecting to audio, so you may have to come back to him, Ahmad.
I see his face.
Oh, he's here. Excellent. Perfect.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hubert Edwards. I am a professional accountant by training. I have done a number of things, including working in financial services, in the accounting sector, working as a regulator. I have taught risk management, compliance, and a number of subjects. So basically, as Natasha would have indicated, I'm one of those evolving individuals. I have a love for risk management and teaching and sharing. And so I'm here to share today. So hopefully you will learn something valuable from what I have to offer.
Very good. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you have not noticed by now, I'm going to remind you or bring it to your attention. We have people with 75 letters at least behind their names, thousands of accreditations. They've been to 50 schools each. Natasha even got a new hairdo for this session today. So I want you, Derek has on a lapel that I'm sure LaShanta, his wife, made herself. I'm certain of it. They are a creative bunch. And so we have experts is an understatement for sure, but it's so exciting to have these 3 join us today to engage you and to enlighten you and to also impact your life on the importance of ERM. And I believe we have a watchword today. Aside from transition, it could be evolve. I believe the 3 of our panelists have said that word today, and I believe we can feel it safe to use those words interchangeably, because to transition is to an extent to evolve. And that's exactly why Wellington and I and our companies have partnered together. WHI and ATM, Astute Management, for those that may not know, is my company, and I'm the CEO of that company. And we are both very focused on impacting this country, the world, in a better way, getting people information that they can use every day to improve their professional lives, but also their personal lives. And Wellington and I both share the same passion, and so we have partnered together in this series to bring this all to you. And as you can see on your screen, we have the transition series roadmap, and we're covering topics like today, enterprise risk management. We started off with the power of resilience. We moved then to execution, We're going to be talking about divergent thinking. We're going to be talking about data literacy, becoming a lifelong learner, things that you can actually take on your life journey to success. And we are so happy that you've decided to transition with us as we take on these incredible topics with these incredible people to impact this world in an incredible way. So it's a pleasure to have you, and we're excited you decided to join us today.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. I could feel the excitement, Ahmad. Listen, when you
Indeed.
said the 75 letters behind the names, I was like, you know, I feel as though if I start more than 5 minutes late, they may charge me. So, you know, we have to start on time.
On time, indeed, absolutely. And so we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with our first presenter, and that's going to be, again, keeping with ladies first, Natasha Robastian is going to start us off this afternoon. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Should I go ahead and
Yes, please.
share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start with some food for thought. Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes.
Good. I'm going to start with some food for thought and with the quote on the screen. So let's have a look. Good risk management fosters vigilance in time of calm and instills discipline in times of crisis. So I thought that was a good place to start because I think everyone would agree that COVID-19 has put us all in a bit of crisis, and certainly a reflection and a look at enterprise risk management is very timely as we seek to navigate this crisis. So, you know, let's take a step back. Enterprise risk management, I'm going to talk about what that is, but I want to talk a little bit too about how did we get here. So historically, when companies thought about risk management, we thought about insurance. Okay, so we know we have the risk of fire, theft, malpractice, public liability. So we need some insurance. Let's get some insurance. Let's cover our risk to address those risks. We evolved, I think, particularly in the more regulated areas and because of regulatory scrutiny. And we started to realize that, okay, there are some risks that we can't insure. We started to look at things like compliance and AML. And then we're at a place now where we realize that, okay, are particularly for financial services, because I know on the line, and there may be some who anti-money laundering and compliance is less of an issue for, but those in the regulated industries, as we started on this journey to enterprise risk management, I would say that that was more of a first step. And in fact, historically, most organizations married compliance and risk management. As we moved away from reflecting only on what do we need to do to ensure that we're meeting the letter of the law and the policies and procedures that we put in place internally, and we're complying with those, we realized that to address the broader risk, we needed to do more. So that's where we get to enterprise risk management. What do we do? Number one, we identify our risk, we assess our risk, and then we prepare. We're preparing for any of the dangers, the hazards, the potential disasters that would disrupt our organizations. Because if our organization, our business is interrupted or disrupted, then it means that we very likely will be unable to meet our objectives. So is it a one size fit all approach? Can I, go somewhere and you can just hand me a package and say, okay, this is your enterprise risk management process? No. It's going to vary from business to business. It's going to vary from industry to industry. And even within same industries, you and I can be in the same industry, but our businesses can still be different. Why?
Yes.
Because our processes, our risk, and our controls are different. So that's where we get down to the next step. If you're looking at the slide, we say, what are the critical elements? So step by step, we say, what should be the number one thing? What should we be thinking about as we address our minds to enterprise risk management? Well, we should have a risk appetite statement. What is a risk appetite statement? It means that we are taking time to figure out how much risk our business is willing to accept. And whose job is that? Is it the risk manager's job? Is it the compliance officer's job? No, the tone has to start at the top. And in the large organizations where we have boards of directors and formal oversight governance committees, et cetera, it starts at that level. Those are the people who should be looking at the objectives, the strategies of the business, and deciding how much risk the business is willing to accept. Everything then is going to flow down from there. So once we've determined how much risk we're willing to accept, then we have to go through this process of then saying, okay, we have 100 processes. Are we going to reflect on 100 processes? No, we want to look at what are the critical processes within our business. So we identify those critical processes. And as I said, it's going to vary from business to business. After we've locked in the critical processes, then we need to understand what are the risks associated with those processes. And we call those our inherent risk. Those are the risks before we've done anything, before we've applied any sort of controls. These are the risks that we know are tied to these particular very critical processes. And so once we've identified those risks, then the automatic next step is, how then do we address those risks? And the best way to address the risk are to put controls in place. So we have to identify the key controls that we think are going to help us to mitigate those risks. And once we've identified those controls that we think are going to help us to reduce or mitigate or minimize those risks, then are we going to be risk-free? No, we never have a zero risk. What we should have left is what we call residual risk. And so it's the risk that remains after applying the mitigants. And this should take us back to our risk appetite statement. What remains after applying our mitigants should be in line with what we've identified as part of our risk statement. It should be acceptable, an acceptable level of risk based on our strategy that we think will still allow us to meet our objectives, to be profitable, to have insight into opportunities. And the other thing to remember is that while a lot of what we're looking at in terms of our risk identification and control processes is about the negatives and what could go wrong, it is also very important to realize that ERM, or enterprise risk management, is also about upsides, because in assessing our risk and monitoring our risk, we can also identify opportunities, competitive advantages. So in going through this process, it helps us not only prevent bad things from happening, but it can also put us in a leading position to get a competitive edge and to move our business ahead of the pack. So we see at the bottom, ERM is a journey, it's not a destination. And why we say that is because once we've done all of those steps that we just talked about, are we at the end? Can we exhale and say, oh, wow, okay, so we've done it. We have enterprise risk management. No, hey, once you've done that, you're just starting. You know, we're just getting hot now. We're just, you know, we're building momentum. We know what we're dealing with. We know the risk controls and processes. And I have that one bullet at the bottom about BCP that I'm not gonna touch, because Derek is gonna blow you away with all of the information about BCP. But I put it there because I want us to remember that a BCP is also a part of our enterprise risk management strategy and our process. Doing all of these, the evaluation of our processes, our risk and controls, and how we're going to manage those on a day-to-day. We also have to think about how we are going to manage those processes, risk and controls if an emergency or contingency arises. So that's where BCP comes in, and Derek is going to tell you more about that.
Indeed.
So sorry, was there a question? Okay, so the diagram here is just to help you to visualize what I said about the evolution. So at the top right, you will see where we're talking about the coverage, and the coverage is, you know, how we began looking at where this all starts, and then we move to the risk appetite. Our governance and our policies is going to be some of those controls that we're going to put in place to address the risk and controls or the risk that we've identified. The data and the infrastructure, all of that is going to be what we're putting into the pot, what we're using to evaluate and identify all of these things that we're dealing with. And then the next natural step in this evolution is the monitoring, the measurement, the evaluation, and the communication. That's key. Why go through all of this process if we are not going to continue to evaluate what's happening? So that's where, if you look at the left side, we have at the top risk assessment. So that risk assessment is an ongoing process, and it's everybody's business. It's everyone's job. So if you're on the call and you're an HR manager, or you're not in risk, hey, whether you know it or not, you are in risk, because risk is everyone's business. The tones should start at the top, but there has to be a culture of risk management. And you, as an employee, as whatever your role is, you have a part to play. If you are a department head, you should be the owner of the risk associated with that department. So it's not the risk manager who owns the risk, like in most companies or in banks, everyone thinks compliance is the compliance officer's business. So whatever business you're in, everyone has a role to play in enterprise risk management. You have to understand it. So you are coming to the table, you are identifying and assessing on an ongoing basis, what are the risks, how are we doing, what are the trending against those risks. So key risk indicators, these are some of the metrics that we are going to use for the ongoing monitoring. And what these do is to look at, what are the metrics telling us? Are they alerting us to particular trends that we're seeing from the monitoring that we're putting in place? This is what's going to tell us whether we're heading into the yellow zone, the red zone, or the green zone. So key risk indicators are extremely important. When we develop our metrics, we have to identify a threshold, things that are going to tell us whether we're crossing over into the yellow line or whether we're good to go, we're looking good, the trending is good. And then action plans. What do we do at the end of all of this? Once we've assessed this, we're doing all the reporting, the board is getting this, we have to be able to develop action plans to address what we see as pitfalls, or even to take advantage of what we see as opportunities. So we document them in what we call action plans. If it's a deficiency, we will call it a corrective action plan. If it's something that's to move us ahead with for a competitive edge, well, it wouldn't be a corrective action plan, but it would be something that we would be using as part of our evolving strategy.
Yeah,
If
Natasha, you sorry to interrupt you. You taking me
Sure.
back to Deloitte days, man. You making me have flashbacks.
Oh,
You have about 1 more minute left, eh, Natasha?
okay, great, thanks. So I want to jump to, and this is what we call the bow tie analysis. So this is just another way of evaluating and looking at risk, but I won't go into that. I want to get to a very recent case. And so this is very important because this is one of the most recent cases over enterprise risk management deficiencies, where the OCC fined major global bank, Citibank, $400 million. Why? Because, the OCC said they got it wrong. They need to enhance. And so not only were they fined 400 million, but there are also restrictions over their decision-making, over acquisitions, over management changes. And it also seems that there's been, in fact, a fallout, because come 2020, the CEO is changing. And for the first time, Citibank is going to have a female CEO. So maybe things will be a little bit brighter, but I wanted to point that out. The cost of getting it wrong can be very high. That might be an extreme case because our companies may be a lot smaller, but the cost of getting it wrong is very high. And what did they do? They paid out almost $1 billion in error. How do you do that? I'm not sure. So I know we're at time, so I'm going to stop it right there, and I'm going to go to my last slide. Another food for thought as we leave. Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. So by enterprise risk management, it gives us the foresight we need to know what we're doing and to be proactive and ahead of the game, hopefully. So I'll leave you there.
Yes. Well done.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Natasha. Natasha indicated that this is not a destination but a journey. And our journey continues now with Mr. Derek Smith Jr. Derek, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Absolutely.
sir.
Now, I don't know how Ahmad and Wellington could put me behind one of my mentors and teachers.
Yes,
This is
yes.
a powerful scenario we have here, but it's all good.
This
It's all
becomes a
good.
testament to how good she really is, Derek. So don't make a
Wow.
shame.
Creme de la creme.
Yes,
Often
yes, yes.
imitated, but never duplicated. And I say that unapologetically.
Hmm.
Alrighty, so we're gonna talk about organizational agility, in particular, business continuity and change management. All right, so let's get into it, guys. So ask yourself this question. 75% of small business owners have no, think about this, 75% of small business owners have no disaster recovery plan, while 52% believe it would take them 3 months or longer to reopen after a catastrophic event. Now, place that into the realm of the Bahamas. Think about the COVID-19 life that we are currently still living in, some 6+ months after the original curfew and lockdown scenarios in March of 2020.
Mhm.
Just think about that for a second. Organizational agility, business continuity, and change management for your organization and for yourself are imperative.
Wow.
So I'm basically going to cover what is organizational agility and what it is not. Business continuity, just snapshots, and we'll have a conversation afterwards. And the top threats to business continuity. So there are 5 principles of organizational agility. There's the textbook definition of agility, but I simply indicate that an organization's appetite to assess, adapt, and act equals their agility. Let me say that again. An organization's appetite to assess, adapt, and act equals their agility. But here's the catch, guys. Agility is not incompatible with stability. Agility actually requires stability.
Wow.
Let me say it again.
Right.
Agility requires stability.
Mhm.
So there are 5 aspects of organizational agility. You have step 1, which is the frame, step 2, the limit, step 3, a simplified look, step 4, which is the subtract, and step 5, which is the verify. So as we talk about the first step, frame your problem correctly. A poorly framed problem may equate to financial wastage, loss of vital time, or even bigger, a fine. Stick up in there. Natasha just gave the best example known, which was last week's biggest breaking news. $400 million fine for Citi. Step 2, you have to limit change. Only reduce the bottleneck that causes the problem. Large-scale changes will have uncontrollable large-scale effects. Let me say it again. Large-scale changes will have uncontrollable large-scale effects. You have to figure out what the bottleneck is and why things aren't moving smoothly. When you know where the bottleneck is, be uncompromising on your making of the change. By accepting the bottleneck and making the change elsewhere, you destroy the change process in its entirety. Step 3, simplify the change. Like I always say throughout all of my presentations, you have to keep it simple, stupid. Simple as that. I took it from my French lecturer at the University of Bahamas. Back then it was COB, and Lord knows that has been the biggest impact of my life. Do the simplest possible thing to reduce the constraints or the bottleneck. Change should be simple and effortless. Let me say it again. Change should be simple and effortless. 4th step, subtract before you add. Eliminate structures, processes, or tools that cause problems. The simplest possible thing we can do is usually get rid of a blockage, not adding to the blockage. Problems don't get solved by adding something on top. I hope some executives that are here listening attentively. Verify, which is the last step, verify your outcomes. Verify your outcome before calling something a success. Where some of our national leaders would think about this. Verify your outcomes. No, but seriously, we're talking about risk management. It's a buzzword that we've heard for the last 6 months. But what really is it? And Natasha set the beautiful framework for what enterprise risk management is. So as we move on, business continuity, another buzzword around the pandemic. All right. So business continuity is strategic and tactical capability of an organization to basically pivot or perish. Business continuity is basically the strategic and tactical capability of an organization to pivot or perish. The reality is business continuity is more than a disaster recovery plan. In the Bahamas and throughout my experience, we know that we have some plans for when a hurricane comes. Step 1, step 2, step 3. But in actuality, a plan for a hurricane, which is a type of disaster, is an aspect of business continuity management. Because you will see shortly that there are various types of disasters that you can plan for. So how do you make up a BCP? There are team roles and responsibilities. Natasha explained what risk assessments are, and they're also business impact analysis. You have to identify and set objectives and goals. You have to have proper and articulate crisis management systems. You must plan the implementation and you must test the implementation. So let's talk about some top threats and why, when you hear a person say throughout the world that they could not prepare for a pandemic. Let's look at physical threats. You have natural catastrophe. You have malicious damage. Hold on, wait for it, guys. You have infectious disease outbreak. So, scientifically, by definition, a pandemic is successive epidemics of the same problem, basically put. So, coronavirus is a disease. So what we're saying, could we or could we not plan for a pandemic? I'll leave that for you to answer by the end of the presentation. You have technical threats. We all know of our utility disruptions. We won't call any particular company's names. Equipment failure. Cybersecurity. This is Cybersecurity Month, and cybersecurity is on the rise, be it a profession and the risk associated with cybersecurity. And then you have emotional threats. Employee strike, disgruntled employees, loss of key employees or suppliers and customers, and mass resignation. These are all threats to your business. Now, what do you think about your life? You can put your life threats into these same categories and ask yourself, What are your physical threats in your personal life? What are your technical threats in your personal life? What are some of the emotional threats in your personal life?
Mm.
And are you prepared to either pivot or perish?
Indeed.
Wow.
And what I would say in closing is that now is always the best time to start. Okay, you can't fix anything that you have not done in the past, but you can adjust for the future. I sit in rooms where persons are flourishing in the pandemic, and then I walk outside of that room, and persons are complaining and preferring, within a discussion I was just in a couple of days ago, preferring to listen to certain talk shows and complain all day. Life is about perspective. Choose your perspective wisely. Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Derek, I believe that it's fitting that you should add 4 more letters behind your name, sir. And they can
Listen.
be PHPT for profit. That was almost prophetic in its perspective, Derek. That was amazing. I think you've given us some real important things to think about and to consider. And I never really thought about the emotional threat when it comes to it, but those are very important aspects, especially with the HR professionals and business leaders on the call today, because that is exactly the place we're in right now.
Mhm.
We have to keep that in mind as we traverse these very risky waters. So thank you very much for your perspective, Derek. I appreciate that very much.
And Ahmad, you know what's powerful about it too is that when you hear these type of presentations, you can't help but introspect, right? So literally, as he was presenting, I'm making notes. I'm like, all right,
Yes,
Efren, you let the ball drop there.
yes,
Gotta talk to
yes,
your wife about this, So this is eye opening. This is really eye opening.
absolutely. Indeed. And so as we continue now, we're going to invite Mr. Hubert Smith. Sorry, Hubert Edwards,
Hubert
forgive me. I'm
Edwards.
very sorry, Hubert. Sir, very sorry about that. Please join us, Hubert, as you take the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ahmad. If I'm Smith, I hope I will do better than Edwards. So it's fine. Thank you so much. I think the two presenters before me have set the groundwork. And so, I have an easier task and I'm just going to focus in on some stuff narrowly. I want to say from the beginning, you must understand this. If you walk away with absolutely nothing else, remember this. Enterprise risk management is about enhanced value. At the end of the day, it is designed to expand shareholders' value. So people go into business and they go into business to achieve objective. And so the definition you see on your screen, which the areas which I have underlined, it says applied in a strategy setting across the enterprise. And it does that to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the entity objectives. And one of the most important objectives of any organization is perpetual existence. Companies exist to go on forever and ever. And as a result of that, ERM helps it to fulfill this thing. I'm having a little bit of a problem. Okay, my thing is moved. So here's the ERM framework. And there are many, many frameworks. The framework which I am showing here is based on COSO, C-O-S-O, Committee of Observing something. You can go check it out. But COSO shows this under multiple dimension. So the entity objectives can be viewed under these 4 categories. And at the top, you see there is strategic. The next one is operation, then reporting and compliance. Natasha mentioned a lot about the compliance reporting. Unfortunately, too often, many persons pay attention only to the operations. And they look at risk management at the process level, as opposed to looking at it at the overarching strategic level. So over here, you would see the risk universe. And the risk universe includes your compliance, your financial, your operational, but also your strategic. Strategic is very, very important. So ERM consider all the activities at the enterprise level. That's what the E in ERM actually means, enterprise risk management. In fact, enterprise risk management can be looked at in this way. It's like your Bible. It's the Old Testament and the New Testament. In the Old Testament, all we talk about was risk management, risk management, risk management in the traditional sense. In the New Testament, we talk about enterprise risk management because we understand that if you manage risk in a siloed fashion, that is, if you manage the credit risk alone over here and the marketing risk and the operational risk without looking at the interconnectivities, the spillovers, and the tension that they put on each other, you are going to fail miserably. So you look at it at the enterprise level, you look at it at the division and the subsidiary level, if it's a big international organization which have multiple subsidiaries, and then you look at it at the business unit processes. So here's a framework, and the framework shows you, this is for managing enterprise risk management. Remember, we're talking about the impact that it has on strategy. These 8 components look at what we have at the top. Internal environment. Natasha mentioned the tone at the top. That's what that is about. Because if we get the tone at the top wrong, everything else then fails. Then objective setting. Objective setting is really about strategy. What is it that we're in business to do? We're in business to sell candy. How much candy we want to sell? We want to sell $100 million worth of candy. How much market share do we want to have? We want to have 90% of the market share. Who are our competitors? And so we set these objectives. And then we go and we identify the events which are likely to cause us to not achieve those objectives. Then we go through the risk assessment process, the risk response. We look at the controls. Natasha did that very effectively, but also information and communication. Why is this important? Because information and communication and the monitoring give you the information to feed back into your objective setting. Because risk strategy, of course, in a dynamic environment is about making adjustment. You're never ever going to get it right the first time or all the time. So here is a risk management link. Talk about at the risk level is the impediment to the achievement of the objectives of the firm. The impediments. So it's like you running a 100-meter hurdle. What are the impediments? The hurdles, yeah?
Yeah.
And you did some things. You went out and you trained, you got strong so that you can overcome those hurdles effectively. But they may still knock you down. So if they knock you down, you have to find a way to get up. And what risk management does is enhance the probability. It doesn't move the hurdles. The hurdles are always there. You're fast, you're strong, you're lead, you're supple. It doesn't change the fact that the hurdles remain. What it does, it enhances your probability of going over them smoothly and winning the race. It enhances the probability of the organization, the firm meeting its objective. So understand the risk on one hand, and then understand the ability to manage those risks. A quick risk structure pyramid. At the top of this pyramid, you see the risk governance, which is oversight. Tone at the top, Natasha mentioned that, board of directors. In the middle, you talk about the risk infrastructure and management. So that's your executive management, and it's around the common process of people, processes, and technology. These are the things which usually fail at the end of the day. And then at the bottom level, you have the risk ownership. And if you notice, it's at the base of the triangle where the action is at. So you have the risk process of you identify, assess, integrate, respond to your risk, you design, you monitor, and so on and so forth. And you have your various classes of risk. Notice that on the classes of risk, there is governance, there is strategy and planning, and not just the compliance and the operation infrastructure. So that is something which you must bear in mind very effectively. So ERM is really about strategy and strategic risk. Look at that. Let's put it within the context of COVID, economic shock, pandemic. You see where we start in the red? Look at where we terminate in the green. So you go through all the issues of credit risk, legal risk, liquidity, operational, reputational, and that. Where does it terminate? It terminates into strategic risk. So you have new restriction, new requirements, new way of doing things, curbside buying. You can't go in the store. People have to spray water on your hand because sometimes it's not really alcohol, it's actually water or some greasy stuff. You encounter different challenges, and so you have to adjust. But at the end of the day, remember that this
whole issue of managing from an ERM perspective, it's about maintaining your strategy. And look at what we do. We take governance and we take risk and we take compliance in this new environment in the New Testament. And we bring them all together because we say on the governance, it's about your strategy. It's about your goals and objectives, your policies and procedures, and your structures and processes. Governance manages the risk to the execution of the company's strategy, as well as the risk from the chosen strategy. That is important. It's not always about risk too. The decision you make, the fact that you decide to go into candy, exposes you to the risk that sugar may increase in price significantly. How do you manage that? Well, you buy forward. It exposes the fact that if you store your sugar in a place with moisture, it is going to spoil. How do you do that? You have to have environment which is moisture free. So these are things which you have to bear in mind. And we come into the end very quickly. The stakeholders. Remember that every single individual in the organization and some outside are stakeholders. You are a stakeholder. Your regulator is a stakeholder. The community is a stakeholder. And so when we talk about risk management, it's not simply about looking at it in a narrow perspective within the company, but you have to take the entire universe within the consideration. If you're a financial institution, the fact that the central bank can lock you down means that you have to do things. Natasha gave you the example of Citi being charged. If you do not respect your regulators, it will cause you millions and millions of dollars. That's why we talk about stakeholders, and you are a stakeholder. The security guard is a stakeholder. The watchman is a stakeholder. The tea lady is a stakeholder. These are important persons within the whole enterprise risk management process. And again, this is just a graphic to give you an idea of what the structure look like. And so you will see there under your corporate governance structure, your risk management, and your compliance. Those are the things which make up that complement and form parts and parcel of the overall infrastructure. So just before I get to that in 30 seconds, remember this. These are takeaways for your enterprise risk management. You need to have on one hand your enterprise risk management architecture. And that includes your governance structure, the board ERM committee, and your enterprise risk management processes. Then you have your enterprise risk management strategy, which includes your risk philosophy, your risk appetite statement, your risk tolerance, your strategic risk issues, and risk based on your strategic scenarios. So that are the risks which are coming out of the decisions which you have taken. And then finally, you have your enterprise risk management protocols, which includes your control self-assessment, your tolerance reporting models, your early warning systems, your credit risk and market risk or whatever other risks you're looking at, and your risk reporting models. And then you have to make sure that you have a solid enterprise governance structure where you have the board, you have subcommittees, you have internal audit committees, management, and all of those are clearly defined. They are undergirded by mandates, and these will help to ensure that at the end of the day, you have an effective enterprise risk management process in place. Because if you do not do that, then you will not come back to the way we started, that enterprise risk management is about enhancing value, increasing shareholders' value in perpetuity. Thank you so very much.
Mr. Edwards, I believe you can also take on those extra 4 letters. I loved the Old Testament, New Testament metaphor. That was just amazing. And it really put it into perspective for me specifically. I'm going to be greedy and say put it in perspective for me, but I believe it also helped our participants as well. Well, I don't know about you. What are your thoughts on Hubert's presentation today?
And Hubert always does a good job. So par excellence. Now I want to throw a joke at Hubert and say, Hubert, that was actually 10 minutes.
On the money.
I tell you, I'll do it in 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
On the money.
Good
Indeed.
stuff, my brother. Good stuff, man.
Okay, so we have come to the portion of our session where we can take some questions from our audience. I have my own, about 17 questions already, but I'm going to field from the audience first. We have the first question from LaShanta Smith, and it's for Derek or Natasha.
Stop sharing now, Hubert, please.
Yeah. It's for Derek or Natasha, and it reads, How can a department head make a business case on the need of a BCP post-COVID?
Can you say that again for me, Ahmad?
Sure. How can a department head make a business case on the need of a business continuity plan post-COVID?
Good question. I would say, Lashanta, I think if anything COVID has made it easier for us to make a business case for a BCP plan. I think pre-COVID, someone would have said, BCP, why do we need that? But if there's any manager, director, or anyone in your organization who is not sold on the need for a BCP post-COVID, then they need to give me that recipe of what they're doing right, because COVID has sent everyone into a tailspin. I mean, the central bank did a survey of its registrants, and its registrants came back and said, you know, they were pretty much business as usual. And I would say that they were able to say that because they are required by the central bank to have a BCP plan in place. Not the same case for many other businesses. There are many other businesses, not as regulated as banking, that requires you to have a BCP in place, that requires you to test it periodically, that requires you to actually certify on an annual basis that you have one in place and that it's tested. So for all of these other businesses that, as Hubert said, are scrambling to put in curbside service, scrambling to make sure we have enough hand sanitizers, et cetera, surely we must realize that there is a need for us to be forward thinking and planning for contingencies, expect the unexpected. So I think you've raised a good question. And I think that, you know, everyone within the organization, irrespective of your job, your level, you should be brainstorming and putting it to the top of the pack for management to say, we need a BCP plan. These are the lessons learned from this pandemic. And pandemic is not the only contingency. There are other contingencies, as Derek has pointed out. But surely we must be able to demonstrate that there is a plan in place to deal with what could go wrong, and how we're going to address it. So even though some of the licensees the central bank said, even though we had a BCP, we still had to scramble, because BCPs tend to look at critical staff, and COVID required that there be a plan in place for all staff. So we can use those kinds of examples to sell to our managers and others the need for BCP plans. I hope that has answered your question, Lashanta.
Eric, you want to add any perspective on that?
I would. Natasha has covered it all. I would use an example, and I would take the aspect of the communication. Reality is that when there isn't a crisis, you must plan for a crisis. Scientifically, it's been shown that during crisis, emotions are high, different attributes have changes, different variables have changed, which will cause you to make certain decisions. So it's best to actually plan outside of a crisis. So let's say communication. If you're talking about communication, ask yourself this question if you are in HR, okay? And you're talking to your internal communication manager. Did you have a standard communication staff in the event of any type of crisis? Did you have a standard communication for your regulator, if you're regulated, for any type of crisis? Did you have a standard communication for your customers for any type of crisis? If you can't answer yes to those three questions, you can then place that into a position paper for your executive management. Hey guys, the reality is we have learned that these are deficiencies that have occurred. What was the impact? Because the reality is executive, C-suite owners and managers look at numbers and look at money. How many persons have resigned? You have them already furloughed and they still decide to resign. What's the reason why? It could be because of the communication levels. You hear within the community the fact that I haven't heard from my company, or I've heard from them once in 6 months. What else will happen? If they don't hear from you over this period of time and you didn't have a proper communication strategy in place, when they're back, your A team member could all of a sudden be a D team member
Mhm.
because you have no communication with them. You don't know what changes have happened. You don't know what deaths may have happened because of COVID-19. You don't know the emotional tools, all of that because you didn't have a proper communication strategy.
Indeed, thank you so much for that perspective, Jarek and Natasha. We have another question from our audience, and this question is from, give me one moment, from Melissa DeVoe. And the question reads, how does your, excuse me, how does your external stakeholder affect change within your organization? And this is for no one person. So any of you can feel free to chime in here. I'll repeat it again. How does your external stakeholder affect change within your organization?
Let me take a shot at that. The external stakeholders are critical because a lot of us, and because we're in the Bahamas, and so financial services is readily understood. One of our most important stakeholders in the financial services is the central bank. Yeah. Another stakeholder would be obviously the government and the community which the bank will serve. When the regulator as a stakeholder changes regulations, come up with new ways, more stringent ways, maybe in response to things which are happening out there in the world, then all of a sudden your internal approaches will have to change. If, for example, let's take our lending ratio, which stands, I think, at about 45%. If the central bank tomorrow morning says to all commercial institutions that the ratio have to be 70%, then all of a sudden a number of the customers who usually qualify will no longer qualify. That will affect the whole strategic thrust of the bank, because now the bank revenue changes, because the sales target that the bank had before will have to change. And so it will have to make some readjustment. How do I continue to lend? And we'll now run around and we look at, okay, maybe we have some customers and they have some deposit with us. We will take those deposits and consider them as part and parcel of computing our ratios and so on. But you see what is happening here. There are shifts which take place as a result of regulations, as a result of laws, as a result of rules. It may not even be someone as powerful as, say, a regulator, which on the law will and can cause you to do that. Let's say there is a change in the community. They don't like you anymore as an organization. They're talking bad about you. So you now have a reputational issue potentially coming on stream. Persons decide, well, these days we march a lot in the Bahamas, right? They decide they're going to march on you. And persons start asking why they're going to march on you. And they say, well, guess what? They don't treat their customers right. They don't treat their employees right. That's not a good place to work. What do you think is going to happen? So external stakeholders have a fundamental impact, or can have a fundamental impact on what happened within the organization. And what we do in the organization have a fundamental impact on how the stakeholders respond to us. If we go back to Natasha's example, the regulators didn't charge Citi because the regulators don't like Citi. They charged Citi because Citi had weak internal risk management, which causes some problem. And as a result of that, the regulators responded and charged them. So, it's a dynamic situation, and it's something which can't be ignored. Pay attention at all times to your external stakeholders, and you'll be in good stead.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for that, Hubert. We have one more question from the audience, and this question reads, what strategies can management use to boost morale in the workplace during this COVID new normal? Employees are walking around like zombies.
Okay, no problem. I'll take a shot at that. It's going to be a
Thank
quick
you,
shot.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be judged by my assistant director of HR wife.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm sure I'll be judged. But with that being said, what management can do is, first of all, formulate communication, formulate when, how, and by which means they will communicate. The reality is, touch people where they are. But what that requires is that there should have been some dialogue, some understanding about your employees about how they act with certain scenarios, that all that data plays into how you will communicate. So management should reach out to the different team leads. Hey guys, please communicate with your employees or your staff or your team members once a week. Once a week, that's convenient for them. It may be inconvenient for the manager, but convenience for the team member. That's one step. The other step is when they communicate. Are they going to be communicating policies, procedures, and changes, or will they be communicating to say, "Hey, how are you doing? um, how have things changed for you? Are they going to be communicating any particular decisions that were made by executive management? These are the things that need to be considered when they are communicating. Or they can decide a different strategy where it's just going to be a formal communication. It all depends on how the particular culture of that organization was and how you can change it. I actually think this is a good time to change the culture of organizations during this pandemic. You may have been seen to be stuffy by many of your staff. This is now an opportunity to shift the way they think about you based on how you communicate.
Yes.
That's a very good point, Doug. And I think Natasha mentioned it earlier about this being the perfect time to have the discussion around BCP, culture changing, all of these things that you're mentioning now, Derek. I think it's important that the HR leaders in the conversation today understand how very serious their roles are. And I do have a question because there's nothing else that came in from the audience. But before I ask mine, does anybody else have a question I would like to ask, whether by unmuting your mic or by typing into the chat at this time? Any other questions from our audience?
As we pressure tall, as we
Indeed,
wait on as we wait on the audience, I do have a question I'd like to throw out there.
Mhm.
So I heard all our learned colleagues talk about inherent risk and residual risk after you put in your mitigation strategies. What about new risk? So, you've developed your mitigation strategy, you have an acceptable level of residual risk that you feel you could work with. But suppose going through that process, you have some new risks that have been added. How do we deal with that, and what is that called?
That's what we call evolution. That's what we talked about in the beginning. So it's not a destination. That's another point we made earlier.
Hmm.
You don't arrive. So as you continue to evolve, as you continue to go through your processes, as you continue to implement your strategies and meet your objectives, you have to continue to evaluate. And you have to be able to identify new risks, because you're absolutely right. If we're going to be perpetual, as Hubert said,
Hmm.
there will continue to be new risk. It may be risks that are outside of our control, or it could be risk based on the ongoing development and strategy or direction that the company is going. We could be implementing new products. We could be acquiring a new business. It could be things that we are doing internally to grow and develop our business, but it could also be something such as COVID, that's unexpected and outside of our control. So we have
Yeah.
to continue, as part of our ongoing risk assessment and evaluation, we have to be able to identify new risk. And when we identify those new risks, then we continue to apply that process. So what are the controls we need to mitigate that risk? How do we ensure that that risk doesn't impede us from continuing to satisfy our objectives and our strategies?
Okay. That makes
Let me
perfect sense.
let me throw a little slightly twist. Totally in agreement with Natasha, but just look at it in a different way.
Hmm.
You take your inherent risk, you apply your controls, and you have residual risk. If you look at it from an enterprise point of view, the new risk that you are talking about is simply now an increase in your residual risk, which require you to start to think about what additional treatment you're going to bring to the mitigation of the risk. Something pops up. It's like let me use this example. It's like digging a trench for, let's say you have some water and you're digging a trench, right? And you expect it to go in this direction, but all of a sudden the water pops elsewhere. What are you going to do? So you have a couple of options from a risk management perspective. You either going to avoid it because this is something that you didn't expect, and this is something that you don't want to be a part of anyway. You're going to say, okay, I can accept that risk because, not too bad. Or you're going to reduce and mitigate the risk. So because the environment is dynamic, you have to realize and you have to be cognizant of the fact that your treatment process is always going to be ongoing. And then to make that loop back to where we started this whole discussion, the new risk that pops up is either going to result in an opportunity for you to exploit and improve, or something which you need to mitigate in order to help to maintain and enhance the value that you currently have. So again, it goes back to strategy. What strategy decision are you going to take? You work that back into your risk governance framework, and then you make the decision. And it goes on and on and on and on, and it never stops.
I am, I could be here until 9. So let me hand it back to Ahmad, because I could see I'll keep us here forever. But yeah, I am currently studying for my PMP, and an aspect of the PMP deals with risk. And I just find this so interesting. It's not only interesting, but it's so relevant now that we're going through COVID and we're seeing some of the gaps that really exist in the businesses and in the community. Over to you, Ahmad, though. Over to you.
Indeed, we do have one more question, and that question comes from me. I believe, Hubert, you spoke about operating in silos when it comes to risk. A lot of businesses believe, I think, that they can handle the concept and the construct of risk, right? How do you suggest people rid themselves of thinking in silos? So operational risk, the risk when it comes to this, the risk when it comes to that. How do they get to a collective approach and a collective thought process around risk management? How does that happen?
It starts with obviously embracing what we are talking about here, enterprise risk management. And enterprise, the emphasis is on that. You want to ensure that you're looking at your risks, your exposures, your hazard from a organization-wide perspective. Then you need to employ some of the principles and the discipline that fall under enterprise risk management. So you have to have an effective governance structure. You need to make sure that the board knows what it's supposed to do. So you do not put your friend Ahmad on the board just because you like him. You put individuals there who are going to be challenging the work of senior management, and they understand where risk is. You pay attention to your corporate governance structure. You pay attention to understanding how risk works. So for example, most organizations fail not because of credit risk, not because of market risk, but ultimately because of liquidity risk. The only time you're out of business is when you run out of money, yeah? So understanding how all of these risks eventually terminates into liquidity risk, understanding how operational risk then crystallize into a financial risk, understand the interplay between the various risk classes is where the action is at. And so when we sit and we talk about, we have these discussions, and this is a very good discussion, it's not just a bunch of buzzwords. It's not just a bunch of nice words. When Natasha talked about risk appetite and key risk indicators and matrices, these are real things which need to be implemented to inform the organization of what is happening, so that you don't have an individual coming to you and say, guess what? Our operational risk is great. We are managing credit risk over here and we good. Our IT risk is great, but the treasurer call you up and say, we have no money. Organization just failed. And the reason the organization have no money is because the guys spend a ton of money and buy the best IT infrastructure possible. Why they spend a ton of money, buy the best infrastructure possible without considering how the cash flow impacts ultimately the business strategy. And so we end up in a situation where we have a Lamborghini that has no engine in it and mileage under drives past it. You understand what I'm saying? So
I feel like I need to get up and walk. I
we
can't
have to get we have to get the collection plate. We have to get a collection plate. Somebody please pass it around. Derek, you have it? Who have it? This is church this afternoon, okay? This is church. My Lord. Hubert.
The mic has been dropped. The mic has been dropped.
My Lord,
Like
my Lord.
like I said yesterday, even if I drop with purpose.
Yeah. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Listen, I believe that we are having a moment in time where we have to
Wow.
consider everything about risk because this is a risky time we're living in, right? Whether it's in your professional practice or in your personal life, as Derek highlighted, you have to consider the things that are going to affect you. When Wellington and I sit together on a Wednesday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon before our sessions to plan it out, we're thinking, what if that company that Derek didn't want to mention, does something with the lights and something happens? What if my internet goes out? What if my computer crashes the day before? What are we doing? We're managing the risk in this process by trying to present information for people who want to learn and improve themselves. And in everything we do, it's evident that it's going to attract some risk. But the blessing in that is that you can also look to mitigate, accept, and even avoid certain aspects of risk, as you would mention just now. So that's really, really good. Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
Yeah, I had to get up and walk. Sorry, guys.
Woo.
First webinar I ever did that in, but it was that good. It was that good.
Yes.
Wellington Ahmad, if I may, and because since I'm the only functioning compliance officer right now,
Yes,
and I
sir.
have to provide a little bit of credible challenge, right? What I would say is that the compliance officer's role is pivotal in the management of this risk. Okay,
Gotcha.
in the monitoring of the management of this risk.
Mhm.
I mean, it's pivotal. So you don't just say, okay, we're gonna tell you what the laws are, what's the playground, what's your different points that you can make,
Mhm.
but we need to monitor it, and we have to consistently monitor it. And when we talked about stakeholders earlier, okay, if you watch, and I wrote an article and I called the actors, all right, the reality is, historically, and Natasha and both Hubert can speak to this, the Bahamas is known to have low political risk. And the
Mhm.
reason why we could have low political risks is because we have a democracy, because we have elections every 5 years. There happens to be no murders, no killings, no kidnappings, stuff of that, blah, 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 blah. Okay? But in a pandemic, the look or the perspective regarding that risk will change based on the comments that are made. So when you hear the WHO and all of the different world organizations saying, hey guys, drop all of the political jargon, okay? We need all the tribalism, and we need to have a collective approach to how we're dealing with the real risk, which is COVID-19, okay? You just have to let it go. And the reason why you have to let it go is simply because this is going to impact the same thing that Natasha and Hubert are talking about, which is your risk assessments.
Yeah.
And those risk assessments should be done. Now that you're in COVID-19, I would recommend for the compliance officers that are here, that are thinking, okay, the law only requires us to do it once a year. The reality is you should probably touch that at least twice since March.
Yes.
Continuously touch it. Because it will continuously change based on the comments of all of the actors.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. Derek, what comes to my mind when I hear you speak is that we have to change our mindset. I think organizations view, and this is just across my couple years of experience, but organizations view risk management professionals, internal audit, and compliance as the enemy. It's
The
like,
enemy.
well, oh, good Lord, Derek got to come in and do this review again. Like, really? Seriously? Right in my busy time? But I think we need to understand that we're all partners and supporting each other in this process, and we need to collaborate. We have to collaborate. There's a saying that got dropped in my spirit earlier this year that says it's not about competing, it's about completing. And I feel that internal audit, risk, and compliance has a role to play in completing this equation, and it's critically important. So I just wanna make mention of time. We are trending about 10 minutes behind time. I just want to put that there. So for those of you that have to drop off right at 3, we appreciate your time. But for those of you that can stay until about 3:10, continue along with the discussion. We didn't want to reduce any time for the Q&A because we feel that Q&A is important to resonate and bring those points home. So just wanted to give you early notice on that. We're now going to take a quick 5-minute break to switch our mental gears, because after the 5-minute break, we're going to get into a case study where I will provide an overview. We will then put you into virtual breakout groups, and you will have a case study to work through. For those of you that registered up to about 12:30, right before this webinar, you would have gotten the case study ahead of time to read. If you registered 12:31 and onwards, you would not have gotten it. So apologies. But after this 5-minute break, we'll get into the case study. We now have Rodney Bain from Service Culture Firm to tell us a little bit about what they do and to share a short video on some resume do's and don'ts. So Rodney, you are up, my brother.
Thank you so much, Rodney and Ahmad, for having us. And I do stand on behalf of my smarter wife, who represents Service Culture Firm. And we are a management solutions company, mainly specializing in HR and just management stuff in general. We are branching out into different things because of COVID, whether it's web design, whether it's video design, different things. But primarily, we are a management consultancy firm. And one of the things that has been a hot item for us is our resume services. So I would now, if I'm allowed, I will share a quick clip showing our resume services. And you hear from my lovely wife.
Go ahead. For sure. He's a wise man, Ahmad. You hear him say it's smarter wife?
Yeah, and I can attest to the smartness because she and I grew up together and she's always been smart. So Rodney, you win.
Yeah, you win. Wise man.
Share my screen with that. Can you see it before I start?
We can. Can you make it full screen, perhaps?
So can you see it? Is it full screen on?
It is appearing to get there. Or you could play it as is. That's fine. That's fine. I think it's visible.
Try one more thing. Technology. Let me try one more thing. 1 second.
Sure. No problem. No problem. If you guys are enjoying today's session, drop us a note in the chat and let us know, eh? Thank you, Owen. Thank you, Donnell. Excellent. Liz, you know I appreciate you from day one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. LaShanta, thank you. Even though Derek say the pressure tall. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Indeed. Thank you, Melissa, for your questions and participation today as well. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Oh, Nathaniel, you here too. Appreciate you, my brother.
Indeed.
Appreciate you.
Nathaniel is another prophet, Wellington, so you got to be careful.
Yeah, boy, I tell you. But he could speak some things over my finances now. I'll let him speak it over finances.
Absolutely, I receive it. Open arms and open eyes. I receive it.
Yes, Lord.
But now, can you see it now?
Yes, and it's very clear.
Full screen?
Yeah, that's good. You can play it. That's good. All right.
You hear as well?
Yes, you can hear.
Hi, my name is Nadia Bain, Human Resources Partner at Service Culture Firm, where we offer management solutions. One of our most highly requested services is our resume redesign, where we take your existing resume and redesign it in a way that makes you stand out amongst the competition. Today, I've been invited by Wellington Hepburn International and Astute Talent Management to offer some tips and tricks to the Transition Series attendees so that they can redesign their own resumes. So this is an example of what we in Human Resources may call a bad resume. If you look closely, we have Jane Doe's resume. The first thing we notice is that there is no clear design style, which means that this resume is going to be hard to read. And we have to search for information with the time that we may not have if we're combing through hundreds, if not thousands of applications. Another thing we notice is that Jane Doe does not have professional email address or physical address for that matter. Her telephone contact is that of her mother's and not her own. Jane's objective is not personalized to the job she's seeking and is a bit shallow. There are typos throughout her resume, and her educational history is padded with unnecessary information, such as her preschool and primary school she has attended.
Yeah.
A big problem that is sure to frustrate the recruiter is the lack of organization in the work experience section. The job titles are missing, and so is the brief description of Jane's duties. The jobs are not listed sequentially, which adds to the overall confusion. Lastly, Jane Doe has listed some skills that may be irrelevant to the positions she has held and the job she is seeking. After review, most likely, Jane will not be shortlisted. Here's an example of a good resume. It has a design that designates a space for all of her information. Jane Doe's resume is now tailored for the job she is seeking, and her objective is clear and professional. Jane has chosen to highlight her most recent jobs, going back over a span of 10 years. If the jobs are relevant and can fit on preferably one page, you can list more, but be concise. She's added her job titles and responsibilities, which underscore her skills and abilities. Speaking of which, her skills and abilities have been updated with relevant information that would be valuable to any employer.
Mm-hmm.
As you may have noticed, her contact information has been updated with her own personal contact, a professional email address, and a concise physical address. And for good measure, she added a reference section with the names, titles, and email addresses of contacts utilized for her references. It's not really necessary, but it's not harmful either. So let's review some of what we've learned today. Choose a layout for your resume that best exhibits all of the information. Create a professional email address that is preferably your first and last name only, if you do not have one already.
Mm-hmm.
Your physical address should be concise, and telephone contact should belong to you and not a relative. Tailor your resume to the job you desire, or to best reflect your work experience. List your jobs in sequential order, starting with the most recent. Remember to add your job titles and brief descriptions that highlight your skills. If possible, reduce your resume to just 1 or 2 pages of information. Redesigning your resume takes a bit of time, creativity, and exacting attention to detail. It helps to have a second pair of eyes to spot errors. If you need more assistance, check out www.serviceculturefirm.com. I hope it helped. Enjoy the rest of the series. Bye.
Excellent. Rodney,
Oh my gosh.
Rodney, to you and your smarter wife. Thank you for that. For all of you that don't know, or you should know by now, Rodney and Nadia own a firm called Service Culture Firm, and they're doing an outstanding job. You know,
Yeah.
hopefully this doesn't sound like a proud statement, but WHI only partners with the best. And we made it a point to partner with Service Culture Firm last series as a part of our C3. So hats off to you and your wife, Rodney.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you, Rodney. And great job with yourself, man.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, thank you.
That's Rodney. Please give Nadia my love.
Yeah, we'll do, man. Thanks. Good stuff too, man. Keep it up, man.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Indeed. So guys, let's jump straight into it. We know that we are now going to head into our case study. So what are we going to do? Let me explain it to you. So Ahmad, do you mind dropping the case study in the chat for the individuals who wouldn't have gotten it yesterday?
Sure.
We're going to give you 20 minutes. We're going to put you in virtual breakout groups to discuss a case study that our panel has prepared. So the case study is a page and a half long, and it speaks about a fictitious company called Diamond Bloom Limited. And for those of you that have read it, great. For those of you that haven't seen it yet, we're putting it in the chat. We would encourage you to save it on your computer, because when we pass you out into the digital breakout groups, I don't think that you will have access to the main chat anymore. So open it up. You know, if you don't want to save it, you don't have to save it, but at least open it on your computer so you can reference it. All right. There are two considerations we want you to work through in your team. After reading the case, what were the positive actions taken by Diamond Bloom, and what possible opportunities for risk management enhancements do you feel you and your team would like to recommend? In each group, we'd like for you to select a team lead. The team lead is responsible for capturing the team's answers and also to encourage and foster team discussion. And like we said, you'll review those discussion questions and brainstorm.
Indeed, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm ready when you are. I have the questions back up on the screen.
Okay.
Once you bring everyone back, you know, you could just—
I'm going to close it now. So it'll take the 60 seconds to get them back to the room.
All right, cool. And then I'll just level set the conversation, or you could even level set the conversation just to say these are the two, and then you could go through and choose the teams and do all that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We had 4 groups. So normally when we have 5 or 6, I would choose 3.
Mm-hmm.
So since we have 4, depending on how long the first 3 go for, we may be able to have the 4th group still present as well.
Sure.
Because otherwise it wouldn't make sense to do 3, and it just makes sense to do 2.
Yeah, I got you. When you let them know though that, you know, I don't think that presentation should be more than about 3 minutes or so.
At most, yeah.
Yeah, at most.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the main floor. I've heard some exciting exchanges going on in the groups, and that was really good to hear and to see. I know we had a little bit of a battle about who's going to be presenting, and the non-ERM experts presenting versus the ERM experts presenting. So I'm excited. I just want to calm your nerves. The presentation does not need to be extremely high level. You have 2 questions you should be answering. And so just to put it in perspective for you, your presentation should be about 2 to 3 minutes at most. What we typically do on the session is we would randomly select 2 groups, and I use the computer for that. So the presentations we're going to hear from first are going to be groups 1 and group 3. In the event that we do have some more time towards the end, we may go and hear from the other 2 groups as well. And so the questions are here on the screen for you. And so we'll hear from group 1 first, and then group 3 second. Group 1, are you ready?
Ahmad, do you want to remind us who was in the groups? Because I confess, I don't remember which group I was in.
I apologize. I
I
don't
know
know
the people, but not the numbers.
Okay, so call the people for me, please, Natasha.
So in our group, we had Cheryl, Brian, Clarice. I think was one more person. I don't remember who the other person might have been.
That is group one, and then group three will be I believe it was the group with Derek in it.
Okay, so
Derek and Shelby and Bernal, I believe.
okay, so for our group, Brian Turnquest is going to be speaking on our behalf.
Very good. The
Okay.
floor is yours, Brian. Welcome.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We know well we had one pro that popped out, and that pro was them considering moving to an online platform of selling their goods rather than having the brick and mortar stores, which is a plus in terms of savings and costs and operations and whatnot. But they probably did not do a risk assessment too as well in how that online platform would work in terms of it being hacked or the payment system being secured or whatnot. And then, looking at the controls, any controls in place to avoid or mitigate any of the risks that may occur or those potential risks. And then secondly, on the flip side of that, it doesn't seem that they did any proper risk assessment for in the change of dealing with their products or whatnot. They just jumped into changing products and brands and whatnot, and didn't seem to properly assess it to see what the risks that were involved and moving forward and how it would affect the business, and also changing, also outsourcing their back office business entirely. Did they perform a risk assessment on the companies or persons or individuals that would have been taking over the outsourcing? To they didn't seem to have effectively assessed those risks in terms of outsourcing, in terms of how it relates to the persons that would be responsible for the outsourcing or carrying out that portion of their business. And then two, and also the lack of governance oversight, their communication. It doesn't seem as though that they weren't documenting or having meetings or anything as to what the company was doing or what was going on. And obviously, there was no tone set at the top to affirm the activities or functions of the business. And then, like I said, there were a lack of internal controls completely as to the overall management and of the business in terms of its processing, its carrying out its business. And then two, it doesn't seem to that they had an effective or they had one at all business continuity plan in terms of the region that they were in, where some of the businesses were, in terms of the geographical location where they were prone to hurricanes that would have destroyed the businesses. And if that was the case, what did they have in place to carry on those businesses in those regions, and not just totally been destroyed and haven't had anything or anywhere to turn to carry those on.
Perfect. Brian, thank you so much for your feedback and your insight. It sounds like your discussion in your group would have been very insightful and very invigorating. And thank you for volunteering to share your perspective and your group's perspective today. We're going to hear now from group three.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you too, Brian.
Good job, Brian.
We're gonna cap off at group three just because of time. And so group three, your person, that would have been the group that Derek was in. So the representative there can chime in and now present your findings.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Shelby Bryce and I represent group 3. That's with Derek Smith, Laverne, and Shanette Miller. Positives, we found hardly any positives, but what we did found was an outsourcing of the key functions. We thought it could have been positive if they had SLA agreements in place. We know that they didn't, but it could have been a positive if they did put those SLA agreements in place. And we said that the organization would have been responsible to ensure that the proper agreements were in place and that they were binding, but it is the vendor that execute the function. So it goes twofold. Once the vendor executes the function, the organization should have been responsible to ensure that the agreements were binding and they were accurate. That could fall under negative as well. We found that the corporate governance was not in place. They did not have board meetings. So therefore the tune at the top was not set. We found operational risks. There seems to have needed to be training at the board level. They weren't regulated in their environment. We found HR risks. They got rid of all of the legacy staff and brought in all of the employees that they were familiar with, who may not have been familiar with that field. We took from Derek's presentation, to be agile requires stability. So there were no policies, nothing in place, no controls, reputational risks, they suffered, and lack of controls, no monitoring, lack of controls.
Thank you so much, Shelby. That is a very valuable insight as well. I think you both did a great job in presenting the findings of your group, and I'm sure the discussions were very, very exciting and invigorating. So we appreciate your time today, Shelby, and you're being brave enough to graciously give us your feedback from your group. Thank you so much.
Ahmad, I love the fact that they're picking up the key words. I heard tune at the top a couple of times, so we're paying attention.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yes.
Training transfer is certainly going on. I think anybody left in HR, it'd be great to hear that as well. To those in our groups. I see Hubert is typing to those in our groups. See, we almost covered it all. Indeed, yes, Hubert, it seems that the themes were shared throughout the groups, and that's what's important as well. It sounds as though what was discussed today certainly did stick, and that's what's really important. And as we work to wrap up, I want to invite Natasha, Derek, and Hubert to give your final insight on this topic today. And if there was one thing you'd want the audience to leave with, each of you please share in 30 seconds or less your perspective on what each person should leave with today.
Yes.
Natasha? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and before Natasha goes, to also add to that, after you share your final nugget, tell us a little bit about what your business does. Because we want to know more about what each one of you do professionally.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my final words would be a repeat of what I said before, that ERM is not a destination, it's a journey. And as long as we remember that, we should do well. So the key is to start on the journey. If we've already started on the journey, continue to evaluate it so that we can enhance it to make sure that our businesses continue to improve and take advantage of opportunities. And then in terms of what ERM Strategic Solutions does, we're all about partnering with you. So we do file reviews, risk assessment, just general advisory and consulting. We provide independent directorships. We will come in and partner with you and go through this step-by-step process that we've just spoke about, to help you through this process to get started or to continue to evolve. So again, that's a buzzword, help you to evolve in your journey on enterprise risk management. So, and we also do focused reviews from an AML and compliance perspective, and then the broader reviews at an enterprise level.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
I forgot to say we also do outsourced services. So hopefully we do a better job than in the case study.
Absolutely, absolutely. Derek, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks again, guys, for the opportunity to speak. on this very topical issue, as I was indicating before. Two things I'd like to leave. One, you either pivot or you perish. That's been the theme straight through this pandemic, pivot or perish. And as Shelby would have indicated when our group would have updated, um, business agility, organizational agility also requires stability. It has to be the calm balance of both. All right. And in reference to Derek Smith Jr. risk and compliance, you won't see one without the other. So that's why on your screen you see Derek Smith Jr. risk and compliance. We offer these services if need arises. And also we have the boutique branding Mummy Mogul Genius of LaShanta Smith, otherwise known as Lamarie Smith, who delivers branding, social media management, and website services. And that's the Smith team. And as Rodney, I would borrow from Rodney, my smarter wife.
Wise man. Wise man.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Thank you so much for that, Derek. And Hubert, the floor is yours.
Yes. I have this bad habit of talking when I'm muted. Thank you so very much. It was certainly a pleasure to be here, a privilege to share with Natasha and Derek. You know, I remember the very first presentation I did in the Bahamas on anything to do with compliance and risk was as a result of Natasha Bastian. And so want to thank you so much. I remember that presentation to this very day. But let me say this, ERM is about enhanced value and understanding risk is important. I like to use this example. What is the risk of getting wet if you jump into the sea? And many times I ask persons that, and they take a little bit of time and they do that, but because we don't have much time here, there's absolutely no risk of getting wet if you jump in the sea. It's a certainty that you will get wet. And so when you understand risk management, it's about managing uncertainty. You take away the issue of managing uncertainty. If something is sure, if you know the building is going to burn down, then you don't buy it. It's as simple as that. And so I want to ask individuals that as you leave, bear in mind the whole idea of enterprise risk management. Think about it as broad as possible. Think about breaking down the silos and think about how you can enhance value. The case study, I think, brought that out. As it relates to my organization, Next Level Solutions, we do a number of things. We do risk, as we're talking about here. We touch on issues of compliance, doing policy manuals and so on. We talk about strategy. We can help you with your strategic planning, vision, mission, and so on. We also do training in various areas. Because I'm an accountant, I do touch on areas of finance, and we do extensively areas of corporate governance, building manuals, building infrastructure for board reporting, the whole 9 yards. We also provide services where you have your regulators coming in, because I spent some time as a regulator and as a bank examiner. We can come in and we can provide pre-regulator visits to ensure that when you and your organization are examined by the central bank or whichever examiner, you come out with a clean bill of health. So you can find me there at 376-8951. But also, I do many other things, and I sell the best jerk in the Bahamas. So when you get all this risk management stuff, you want to check us out. Coming up shortly, we will have our Ubuntu Leadership Series. There is no defined date yet, but certainly it's going to be during the month of, going into the month of November. And I am targeting this basically because looking around the Bahamas today, looking around the world today, I have seen where leadership, I think, has gone astray. We no longer think about each other. We no longer care for each other. And so Ubuntu, as you know, is I am because we are. It thinks about the individual. And so we are building a series around that. And we want you to participate. You never know. One of these good presenters may also be a part of that. And so you want to check that out when we put that information out. Again, Ahmad and I totally forget your name. Wellington. You know, that's one of those faults. Thank you for having me here. It was certainly a pleasure. Derek and Natasha, thanks for being allowing me to be a part of your team. I totally enjoy the exchange, learn a hell of a lot, and hopefully we'll be doing some things together in the future. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Hubert. My pleasure.
Yes.
You know, Wellington, yesterday I saw a bit of a sermon from Bishop T.D. Jakes, and
Right.
he preached on the power of coming full circle. And it
Mm,
appears that our presenters today have started their journey at some point with one another or through one another. Jared both of Natasha being his first supervisor. Hubert mentions that the first time he presented a webinar in this country was through Natasha. This is Natasha's first webinar she disclosed to us. And so it's so great to see these three moguls in this industry come together full circle to
yes.
present this wealth of information and knowledge today in such a very regular format. I don't feel as risk averse as I did before I started. I feel like I could go now and speak intelligently about risk matters. I can go and say, you know what?
Listen.
Let's do it this way. We need to have a BCP plan. And I don't want to mix up the terminology, but you get my point.
Listen, Ahmad, I already on PMI website looking at the risk management professional designation.
Listen. I feel encouraged to go and do some assessment now because it truly was, you guys, a really good presentation of information. It was solid information and was also presented in a way where people can take what they learned and literally apply it today.
Correct.
You know, so thank you so much for your insights and your revelations today. It was incredible to have you a part of our team today, and it was just phenomenal.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Ahmad.
Indeed. So Astute Talent Management is my company that I recently started, and I am all about helping you as an organization or the individual realize their full potential. Hubert hit the nail on the head just now, and that leaders have no longer, they've forgotten about each other. We've forgotten about our team members. We have forgotten how important it is to carry one another on the journey, wherever that journey may take us. And I do just that. I take my time to partner with individuals and organizations alike to help you realize your full potential. So from the individual perspective, it could be rebranding a professional stuff. It could be resume redesign. It could be my interview. I'm having a Hubert moment. I'm forgetting what I offer. But I partner with individuals to get ready, interview readiness tools, to get ready for your next interview or your first interview. And I also partner with organizations to help their leadership team brand themselves, can reconnect with each other, and also prepare themselves for the next step in leadership. So I'm excited about that as well.
Yes. Listen, guys, like I said it earlier, WHI only partners with the best. And I view WHI as a talent scout in the industry. And when I saw some of the stuff that Ahmad was doing, I literally wrote in my diary, you need to work with this dude, find a way. So know that you have WHI's full support for all of the services that Ahmad and Astute Talent Management provides. He's doing a phenomenal job. I see that we're at time. I had promised 10 minutes over, so I will power through this very quickly. Wellington Hepburn International is a personal development firm. Our theme is as we grow together. And you probably heard me say a little yes in the background when Hubert was talking about Ubuntu, because it's exactly that. Listen, if I know something, why should I be the only person who knows it? I want everyone to know and leverage the experiences, the education, the knowledge that I've gotten having worked in Canada, in the US, and home. So we do keynote presentations, book authoring. We do online webinar series, the whole 9 yards. So in the interest of time, I won't spend too much more time on it. I do want to say, though, that you can check out my website. It's on the screen, W. Hepburn International. We have some books coming out. We're updating a calendar of events. We quite literally have something going on each week. And you can stay tuned for more updates on the transition series. As I speak about the book, I'm very happy to tell you, round of applause, I'm so happy. It's the first step out of many. The first book for WHI, Cultivating an Agile Mind, which focuses on change agility, is now published. It is on Amazon. And for whichever country you're in, you can go to that particular Amazon domain. And if you search for Cultivating an Agile Mind, you can purchase it. It's a really cool model, man. Check it out. It focuses on 5 R's in terms of being more change resilient, reality and reach, readiness, reaction, response, and results. So check it out if you want to build your change agility. I also want to point out that we have certificates available for sale. So we can provide you with a digital certificate if you wish to commemorate your time on this webinar or any of our webinars. It's $4.99 BSD. And right after this session, I'll send out a note to all of us. And if you're interested, you can reply and I'll send you the PayPal details. Last but not least, as Ahmad said in the beginning, we are on a journey. I'm going to borrow a word from Natasha and say we are on an evolutionary journey. So today we would have covered our third episode in our transition series, but know that 2 weeks from now, we will also be talking about divergent thinking. How do you promote innovation for strategic differentiation? And we will be hearing from the central bank. We'll be talking about the new digital currency, the sand dollar, which is going to be introduced, I think they said third week in October, somewhere around there. So stay tuned, come on out next week and let's learn about how we can continue to promote innovation in our individual and also corporate lives. All right. So thank you guys for your time. Greatly appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great Sunday and a great week ahead. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
All right, take care. Thanks again, Natasha, Derek, and Hubert. Great job,
Absolutely.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so
All right.
much. Bye, bye, everyone. Take care.
All right, cheers.